You're standing on your lawn right now, and you can already see them. The dandelions punching up through the green, the crabgrass creeping along the edge of the driveway like it pays rent. The clover you pulled last year that came back thicker and meaner. You've sprayed, you've dug, you've paid, and every single spring, those weeds show up like they own the place. Here's what I found out. There's 1 cup of a plain cheap something sitting on a shelf near you right now. A whole bag of it for about $9, and it stops those weeds before they ever break the surface of your soil. Not by poisoning your yard, by quietly starving the seeds. I didn't believe it either. I found it because I stopped trusting the label on the expensive jug and started testing cheap things on my own grass, 1 square at a time. 3 springs ago, I was down on my knees along the north fence, that miserable strip where the crabgrass always wins, and I remember pulling a fistful and thinking, I have spent more on this 10-foot patch than I spent on my first lawnmower. That was the moment I got suspicious. That was the moment the numbers stopped adding up. So stick with me, because the thing I'm going to name at the end costs pennies per square foot. It was proven in a real university turf program with real numbers, and it works on the lawn you already have. Not a brand new seeded yard. The tired, patchy, weed-tired lawn under your feet today. I'm going to walk you through exactly how I uncovered it, clue by clue, the same way I found it myself. Let me start with the first thing that cracked this whole case open. I always believed weeds were a spraying problem. You see a weed, you kill the weed. That's how everybody on my street does it, and that's how I did it for the better part of 20 years. But when I actually sat down and read what the turf people write, I found out I had the entire thing backwards. The weeds you can see are not your problem. They already won. By the time a dandelion is waving at you, it has flowered, it has thrown seed, and it has planted next spring's invasion in your soil. Killing it is like mopping the floor while the faucet is still running. The real fight happens underground, in the 2 or 3 weeks when a weed seed cracks open and sends out its very first root. That is the only moment a weed is truly weak, and almost nothing you buy at full price is built to fight it there. The sprays are built to be seen working, because a customer who sees a weed shrivel buys that jug again. A quiet powder that stops a seed you never even knew was there, you can't sell drama like that. So it got buried. That was my first clue, and it changed how I looked at everything. The stuff that actually protects a lawn works invisibly, which is exactly why it never gets the shelf space. Killing what you see is a product. Stopping what you can't see is a secret. But that only raised a bigger question. If the real battle is underground, in that tiny window when a seed first sprouts, then what on earth stops a seed from rooting without also stopping my good grass from growing? Because that sounded impossible to me. And that impossible sounding answer is where the trail started getting interesting. So I went looking, and here's the second clue, the one that told me somebody had been sitting on this for a long time. I started reading old groundskeeping notes and turf bulletins, the kind of material written before there was a giant industry selling us a different bottle for every month of the year. And a pattern jumped out. The people who kept the finest turf in the country, the greenskeepers on golf courses, were not using the fanciest chemicals. A lot of what they leaned on came from the farm, ground up crop leftovers, meals and byproducts from milling grain, cheap bags of stuff that a farmer would recognize before a chemist would. That stopped me cold, because think about who has the highest standards for grass on planet Earth. It's not you, and it's not me. It's the man responsible for a putting green where a golf ball has to roll dead true. If that man reached for a $9 bag of milled crop meal instead of the premium jug, that told me the premium jug was never the real secret. The real secret was cheaper, older, and quieter than anything on the retail shelf. Now, here's where I have to be honest with you about why you never heard this. It isn't a conspiracy with a villain in a dark room. It's simpler and honestly more insulting than that. There is very little money in telling you to buy a $9 bag once. There is enormous money in selling you a 4-step program. 1 bag for early spring, 1 for late spring, 1 for summer, 1 for fall, at $30, $40, $50 a bag, plus the spreader, plus the spot spray, plus the service visit if you give up and hire it out. The whole model is built to keep you coming back 4 times a season, every season for the rest of your life. A cheap thing that works once and quietly is a threat to that, so it doesn't get advertised. It gets forgotten. That's the second clue locked in. The best turf keepers alive use cheap, farm-milled meal, and the reason you never heard about it is that nobody makes a living telling you to buy something cheap. But which meal, and how does a ground-up crop leftover actually stop a weed? That's the piece I needed to prove before I'd believe any of it, and proving it is exactly where I went next. I'm a skeptic by nature, so a nice story from an old bulletin wasn't going to be enough for me. I needed hard numbers from someone with no bottle to sell. And that's the third clue, the one that turned a hunch into a real case. I found the research trail leading straight to a land-grant university turf program, one of the most respected in the country for growing grass in tough conditions. A turf grass scientist there was actually studying something completely unrelated, a disease problem, when he stumbled onto something he wasn't even looking for. In his test plots, in the spots where he'd applied a certain milled crop byproduct, the grass grew fine, but the weed seeds would not take. They'd germinate, send out that first tiny root, and then the root just quit. It couldn't form properly. The baby weed dried up and died before it ever reached daylight. He didn't ignore it, and thank goodness, because that accidental observation turned into years of real research with real measurements. And the numbers are what got me. In the trials, that first season of using this milled meal cut the weeds coming up by around 50 to 60%. That alone would be worth it. But it compounds. Use it again the next year, and you're knocking out well over 80%. By the third year of steady use, some of those plots were sitting at 90+% fewer weeds, because every spring you stop a generation of seed from establishing, you shrink the seed bank in your soil for the year after. It gets easier every single season instead of harder. Let that sink in, because it's the exact opposite of the treadmill most of us are on. With the 4-bag program, you're spraying the same weeds in the same spots year after year, spending more as you get older, and the digging gets harder. With this, the problem physically shrinks. Less to fight next year, and less again the year after that. And here's the part the scientists prove that makes it safe for your lawn. This meal only stops seeds in the act of sprouting. It has zero effect on a plant that's already rooted and established. Your mature lawn grass, with its roots already deep in the soil, doesn't even notice it, except for one happy side effect I'll get to. It only hits things starting from seed. That's the impossible sounding trick from earlier, finally explained. It doesn't know a weed from grass. It just stops any seed's first root from forming. So you apply it when weeds are germinating and your good grass is already standing, and the timing does the sorting for you. So the third clue is nailed down with university numbers. A milled crop byproduct discovered by accident cuts weeds 50 to 60% the first year and over 80% with repeat use, and it's completely harmless to grass that's already growing. But I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, and it's a fair worry, so let me answer it head on before we go any further. You're thinking, that's fine for somebody laying a perfect new lawn from scratch, but my yard is 15 years old, it's got bare spots, it's half weeds already, and it's compacted like a parking lot. This won't help me. I thought the very same thing. So this next part is for you specifically, the person with the tired, established, been through it lawn, because this is where it gets good for you. Here's the thing most people miss about that milled meal. It isn't only a weed stopper, it's also food, real food for your grass. This particular byproduct is naturally packed with nitrogen, right around 10% nitrogen by weight, which is a genuine slow-release feeding, the same nitrogen you're paying a premium for in those fancy fertilizer bags. So when you spread it on your existing hungry, neglected lawn, two things happen at the same time. It blocks new weed seeds from rooting, and it feeds your established grass a slow, steady meal that greens it up and thickens it over the following weeks. And a thick lawn is the real long-term weed killer. This is the secret inside the secret. Weeds are opportunists. They move into bare, thin, weak spots where sunlight hits open soil. Every bare patch on your lawn is an open invitation. When you feed your existing grass and it thickens up and closes ranks, it shades the soil surface, and weed seeds down there can't get the light and space they need to launch. So you're hitting weeds from two directions at once, starving the new seeds and crowding out the old, using one cheap bag. That is exactly what your 15-year-old lawn needs, and it's exactly what the 4-step treadmill never gave you, because a thick, self-defending lawn doesn't buy 4 bags a year. Now let me tell you how to actually use this on a lawn that's already established. Because the how matters as much as the what. You don't till it in, you don't dig up your yard, you spread it right over the top of the grass you have. The documented rate from the turf research is about 20 pounds of the meal per 1,000 square feet of lawn. Picture that. A typical bag covers a good chunk of an average yard, and at roughly $9 a bag, you are treating and feeding your lawn for a fraction of what one bag of name brand weed and feed costs, and you're not spraying a single thing you'd worry about around your grandkids or your dog. Timing is the one thing you can't fudge. And this is the detail that separates people who get results from people who shrug and say it didn't work. Because this stops seeds as they germinate, you have to get it down before your weeds sprout, not after. For the spring crabgrass and the summer annual weeds, that means putting it down early as the soil is just starting to warm but before those seeds wake up. The old-timer's trick I trust more than any calendar date is to watch the forsythia bushes, those bright yellow shrubs that bloom early. When they're in full yellow bloom in your area, your window is open and you want your meal down within the next week or two. You can put a second round down in early fall to fight the cool season weeds that try to sneak in before winter. Here's a piece a lot of folks get wrong, so write this on your hand. This is a weed preventer, not a weed reviver. Because it stops seeds and feeds established plants, you never want to spread it on an area where you're about to plant new grass seed, because it will treat your good grass seed exactly like a weed seed and stop it from sprouting too. So if you've got a bare patch you plan to reseed, seed that patch first, let your new grass grow up and get established and mowed a few times, and only then bring the meal into that area next season. On the rest of your established lawn though, spread away. And a small thing that makes a big difference. After you spread it, give it a light watering to settle it into the soil surface and activate it. Then let the area dry down for a few days. You want that moisture to trigger it, then a dry spell so the sprouting weed seeds, weakened at the root, actually give up and die instead of getting a rescue drink. Water it in once, then back off. That little rhythm is the difference between 50% control and disappointment. Think about how many springs you've spent down on your knees along that same fence line, guessing at the timing and hoping this year's bag finally sticks. That guessing is exactly what I wanted to end for good, and it's why I put everything I've tested into a plain digital collection called the Complete Lawn Fixed System. Penny Lawn walks you through the 5 simple levers that do most of the work for pennies, with a 30-day week-by-week plan any homeowner can follow. Deep Roots takes you further, fixing stubborn bare spots and tired soil at the biological level so a struggling lawn actually turns around. And the full Lawn Fixed bundle sequences all 3 volumes into one system, from your first weed kill to a yard that defends itself year-round. Here's a check you can run tonight for nothing. Walk out and count the bare, thin patches where the sunlight hits open dirt, because those are the exact spots the weeds are planning to move into, and every one you thicken is a weed you never have to fight. And you can prove the money side yourself just by pricing a name brand 4-step program against one plain feed store bag, the way over 50,000 homeowners already did. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. Now let me hand you the last piece, because the reason this one cheap meal beat everything on the shelf is worth hearing. So that's your existing lawn rescue, and it stands completely on its own. Spread a cheap milled meal at 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Time it to the forsythia bloom, water it in once, and you feed your tired grass and starve the next crop of weeds in the same afternoon for under $10 with nothing you'd fear around your family. If you did nothing else from this whole video, that alone would change your spring. But I promised you the full identity, and I haven't said the name yet on purpose, because there's one more layer to this that makes it even better than I've let on. And it's the part that finally closed the case for me. Let me put the last piece in place, and then I'll hand you the name. Remember the greenskeepers and the old farm byproducts from earlier? Here's why this particular one rose to the top. It isn't some exotic thing you have to hunt down. It's a leftover from one of the most common processes in American agriculture, the wet milling of a crop that grows across the entire heartland. When they mill this grain to separate the starch, they're left with a protein-rich meal, and for a long time it was considered a humble thing, mostly sold as animal feed. Nobody thought of it as a lawn product at all. That's the beauty of it. You are buying the same effective ingredient the golf courses can use, but you're buying it in its plain, honest, feed store form for feed store prices, instead of in a shiny lawn care bag with a 200% markup and a brand name stamped on the side. And that's the whole case, laid out clue by clue. The real weed battle is underground in the seed's first days. The best turf keepers fought it with cheap milled crop meal. A university turf scientist proved it by accident and measured 50 to 60% control the first year, climbing past 80% with repeat use. It feeds your established lawn 10% nitrogen at the same time, so it thickens your grass to crowd weeds out on top while it starves the new ones underneath. It got buried not by a conspiracy, but by simple math, because there's no fortune in selling a man a $9 bag that works once and makes next year easier. So here it is. The mystery ingredient, the one cup of cheap something, the golf course secret that starves your weeds before they ever surface, is corn gluten meal. Plain corn gluten meal. The protein byproduct left over when corn is milled for its starch. That's it. That's the whole secret. You'll find it at farm and feed stores, at some garden centers, and online, often sold as animal feed or as an organic soil amendment, in bags that run right around $9 and up depending on the size. And the man who proved it, the reason we can say all this with real numbers behind it, was Dr. Nick Christians, a turfgrass researcher at Iowa State University who noticed in his plots back in the late 1980s that corn gluten meal was stopping weed seeds from rooting while it was studying something else entirely. Iowa State ended up holding a patent on corn gluten meal as a natural pre-emergent weed control. This is not internet folklore. It's documented university research from one of the best turf programs in the country, and it's been sitting there in plain sight for over 30 years while most of us kept buying the 4-step program. Think about what that means for you standing on your lawn. Corn gluten meal does the job of a pre-emergent weed preventer and the job of a lawn fertilizer in a single cheap pass. The pre-emergent you'd normally buy is one product. The fertilizer is another product. The weed and feed that combines them is a premium product with a premium price and usually a synthetic herbicide you'd rather not have around the vegetable garden. Corn gluten meal replaces all three with a bag of milled corn protein you could technically feed to livestock. 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet, down before the weeds germinate, watered in once. And you've done in one honest step what the industry sells you in 3 expensive ones. Let me give you the real money comparison, because this is where it stops being a fun fact and starts being your grocery budget. A typical name brand 4-step lawn program, one bag for each season, runs you well over $100 a year by the time you've bought all 4, and that's before any spot sprays or a service call. Corn gluten meal, bought plainly at feed store prices and spread twice a year, spring and fall, can cover a normal suburban lawn for a small fraction of that. And here's the compounding part again, the part that makes me almost angry I didn't know it sooner. The program keeps you spending the same every year forever, because it never actually fixes the seed bank in your soil. Corn gluten meal shrinks that seed bank every season you use it, so your weed pressure goes down year after year, and your grass gets thicker year after year. You spend less as it works better. That is the exact reverse of everything the shelf is designed to do. I'll tell you what it looked like on my own north fence strip, the one I was cursing 3 springs ago. First spring with corn gluten meal, timed to the forsythia, watered in once. The crabgrass came up maybe half as thick as usual, and the grass along there was noticeably greener within a few weeks from the nitrogen. I honestly thought, all right, half, that's decent. Second spring, that strip had maybe a quarter of the crabgrass it used to grow, and the turf had filled in so much that the bare edge by the driveway had knit itself shut. Third spring, I was pulling a handful where I used to pull a garbage bag. Same strip, same dirt, no sprayer, no service. Under $20 total across those springs. The problem didn't get managed. It got smaller. Now, I want to be square with you about the one honest limitation, because I'm not here to sell you a miracle and I don't want a comment calling me out. Corn gluten meal is a preventer, not a rescue squad. It will not kill a weed that's already standing in your yard today. For the weeds already up this season, you still pull them or spot treat them the way you always have. What corn gluten meal does is stop next year's army from ever forming. So the right way to think about it is a 2-season plan. This year you clean up what's visible and you get your corn gluten meal down on time to block the next generation. Starting next spring, you'll notice fewer of them coming up, and the year after that, fewer still. Patience is the price of admission, and it's a lot cheaper than the treadmill. Here's the other thing you get that the jug never gives you. Peace of mind about what you're standing on. It's milled corn. Your dog can walk on it, your grandkids can roll on the grass an hour later. You're not timing your family around a spray warning on the bag. For a lot of us past a certain age, watching the little ones play on a lawn, we didn't just douse in something that's worth as much as the money we saved. So that's the case closed. The thing that kills the weeds you can't see was never on the fancy shelf. It was in the feed aisle the whole time, proven at Iowa State, hiding behind a $100 program that needed you to never find out. If you've been out there every spring on your knees, spending real money and real weekends fighting the same weeds in the same spots, feeling like you were falling behind on your own lawn, understand this. You weren't losing because you did it wrong. You were losing because you were handed the expensive half of the answer and the cheap half was quietly left out. Now you've got both halves. And that's really who you are. If you've watched me this far, you're the kind of homeowner who wants to see the evidence before you hand over the money. The kind who'd rather spread a $9 bag you understand than a $40 bag you don't. That's the whole reason I started digging in the first place, and it's the only reason this channel exists. So here's what I want you to do for me right now. Tell me down in the comments, when your forsythia blooms, or whatever blooms first in your part of the country, are you going to time your first bag of corn gluten meal to it this spring? And tell me where you're watching from, because I genuinely love seeing how the timing shifts from the warm states to the cold ones. Leave a comment, even one line. It tells me you followed the whole case to the end, and it tells me which secret to chase down next for you. And if you're the type who'd rather investigate before you spend, who's tired of paying full price for the expensive half of the answer, then stay with me, because the next thing I'm testing is a nearly free kitchen ingredient that a groundskeeper swore greens up a yellow lawn in about 10 days without a drop of store-bought fertilizer. I've got it down on a test strip in my backyard right now, and the early results already have me suspicious in the best possible way. I'll show you exactly what I find, numbers and all. Follow along, and let's keep proving how cheap a lawn the whole street notices can really be. Before you go, let me tell you where this really goes. Inside the Honest Lawn Circle, I pick up right where I stopped here, giving you the full application plan, cup by cup, timed to your soil. Ask me your own lawn questions and I answer you myself. No robot, you won't be doing it alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime with one click, no risk at all. Now that your weeds are gone, let's tackle those pesky anthills. In the next video, I'll show you one simple cup that wipes them out for good, without ever harming your grass. It's starting right here.